I stood outside that bathroom door for a full 3 minutes. My hand was raised to knock, but I couldn't move. Inside, my best friend of 12 years was crying so hard she couldn't even stand up in the shower. I could hear the water running. I could hear her trying to muffle the sobs. And I, the person who claimed to know her better than anyone on this planet, had absolutely no idea what to do. So I did the most awkward thing possible. I walked in anyway. And what happened in the next 10 minutes completely changed our friendship forever. Let me take you back to where this story really begins, not the bathroom, not that night, but 12 years earlier, on a sticky September afternoon in 6th grade, when a girl with two lopsided pigtails and a backpack that was clearly 3 sizes too big walked into my homeroom class and sat down in the empty seat next to mine. Her name was Zara. And from the very first second, she radiated this energy that I can only describe as organized chaos. She had color-coded notebooks before we even knew what subjects we were taking. She had a pencil case with labeled sections. She raised her hand before the teacher even finished the question. I remember thinking, who is this person? I, on the other hand, had forgotten my pencil and my notebook, and honestly, I had almost forgotten which classroom I was supposed to be in. She looked over at me, noticed my empty desk, and without a word slid one of her extra pencils across to me, a yellow number 2, sharpened perfectly. I looked at her, she didn't even glance up from her notebook. That was Zara. She didn't make a big deal out of kindness, she just did it, quietly, efficiently, like caring for other people was simply something you did, the way you breathed or blinked without thinking, without needing acknowledgement. We became inseparable after that, the kind of friends that people assume have known each other since birth. By high school, we had our own language, half-spoken words, half-glances, half-ridiculous inside jokes that still make us burst out laughing in the middle of grocery stores. Her mom called us the twins who can't share a face. My mom just called us the chaos duo and left it at that. But here's the thing about Zara that took me years to fully understand. She was the strongest person I had ever met. Not in the way people usually mean when they say that. She wasn't fearless. She wasn't invincible. She was strong in that quiet, grinding, exhausting way, the way people who carry everyone else's weight learn to be strong because nobody ever taught them it was okay to put it down. She was the friend who showed up at your door at 2 a.m. when you texted, "I'm not okay." She was the one who remembered every birthday, every anniversary of every hard thing you'd been through. She was the one who knew which of her friends needed a hug versus which ones needed a distraction versus which ones needed someone to just sit silently with them. She gave all of that freely, constantly, without being asked. And for 12 years I accepted it. We all did, because Zara never seemed to need anything back. She never fell apart. She never asked for help. She never cracked. Until the night she did. The year Zara turned 24 was the year life decided to test her in ways none of us saw coming. It started with her job. She'd worked for 3 years at a company she genuinely loved, a nonprofit doing environmental advocacy work. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't pay well, but it gave her purpose. She talked about her projects with this light in her eyes that I hadn't seen since we were kids, staying up past midnight planning adventures we'd never take. Then the funding got cut. Her entire department was dissolved in a single email on a Wednesday afternoon. No warning, no severance package, just "thank you for your service," effective immediately. She texted me that afternoon, just 3 words, "I lost it." I assumed she meant she was upset. I texted back a row of heart emojis and told her I'd bring ice cream after work. She replied with a smiley face and said, "You don't have to." I should have known with Zara, "you don't have to" always meant "please do." But I was tired that day. I went home instead. I told myself she'd be fine. She was always fine. She started job searching immediately, applying to dozens of positions a week, staying up until 2 and 3 in the morning reworking her resume, writing cover letters, preparing for interviews. Rejection after rejection after rejection. A market that didn't seem to have space for someone whose entire skill set was built around saving the world rather than turning a profit. Then 2 months into all of that, her grandmother died. Mrs. Layla, the woman who had raised Zara through some genuinely hard years when her parents were going through their divorce. The woman who made lamb stew every Sunday and kept every single drawing Zara had made since age 4 in a big plastic box under her bed. The woman who called Zara "my heart outside my body." Zara flew home for the funeral. She was gone for 4 days. When she came back, she seemed okay. She said she was okay. She laughed at my jokes. She ate the food I cooked. She went back to job searching. I believed her. But here's what I missed, what we all missed in those months. Zara had stopped talking about her feelings, not in a dramatic, noticeable way, just gradually the way water recedes from shore before a wave. She'd answer, "How are you?" with busy but good. She'd deflect every personal question with a question about you. She became a master of the subject change, the quick laugh, the "I'm totally fine, now tell me about your thing" pivot. We let her do it because it felt normal, because she'd always been the listener, because it was easy to let Zara be okay, because when she wasn't okay, that meant the universe was genuinely tilting off its axis and none of us wanted to deal with that reality. The truth was she was drowning, quietly, in public, right in front of all the people who loved her. And we were all just standing on the shore, waving. Now we arrive at a Tuesday in November, a night I will never forget for the rest of my life. Zara had a job interview that day, a big one, the kind she'd been working toward for weeks, a senior coordinator role at an environmental research firm downtown. The kind of job that would have let her continue the work she loved with better pay, better stability. She'd spent 2 weeks preparing. She had a portfolio. She had practiced her answers out loud in my living room while I held a wooden spoon and pretended to be the interview panel. She was ready. I was at work when I got her text, just 4 words. I didn't get it. I called her immediately. She picked up on the first ring, which surprised me. Zara almost always texted back first, like she needed time to compose herself before she could use her voice. "Hey," she said, and her voice was flat, not sad flat, not tired flat, something different, something I'd never heard before. It was the flatness of someone who has been running on empty for so long that they've forgotten what the gas gauge even means. "I'm coming over," I said. "You really don't have to. I'm already getting my keys." I showed up 40 minutes later with takeout containers, 2 liters of sparkling water, her comfort drink, don't ask, and a blanket from my car because for some reason I just knew she'd need it. She opened the door and she looked fine. That was the thing, she looked fine, hair done, mascara intact, the blazer from the interview still on. She smiled at me and said, "You're ridiculous," in that warm, affectionate way, and I laughed and we went inside. We ate, we talked about the interview, about the drive home, about the other positions she was considering. She was articulate, she had a plan, she even laughed a couple of times. Around 9 o'clock she said she was going to take a shower and get ready for bed. Normal, totally normal. I told her I'd clean up the takeout containers and wait. I was elbow deep in her kitchen sink when I heard it. A sound. It wasn't loud, it wasn't a scream or a crash or anything dramatic. It was quiet, almost hidden under the sound of the shower running. But I knew that sound. Because it was the sound of someone crying so hard their whole body shakes. The sound of sobs that have been held in for so long that when they finally come out, they don't even sound like crying anymore, they sound like something breaking. I stood completely still. My brain went through 100 options in about 4 seconds. Knock, don't knock, call through the door, text her, wait. I ran through every social script I had ever been handed for situations like this and not a single one fit. This was Zara. Zara didn't cry. Zara definitely didn't cry in front of people. Zara would be mortified if she thought I could hear her. I should wait. I told myself, give her privacy, pretend I didn't hear anything, that's the respectful thing. But then I heard it again, that sound, and something in my chest overrode every socially appropriate instinct I had. I walked to the bathroom door. I raised my hand to knock. And I stood there for 3 full minutes, hand suspended in midair, completely frozen. Because here's what nobody tells you about being someone's best friend. There are moments when the kindest thing you can do is the most terrifying thing you've ever considered. Moments when love requires you to walk through the awkwardness, through your own uncertainty, through the very real possibility that you're going to make it worse, because the alternative is leaving someone alone with their pain. I knocked. Silence on the other side, water still running, then, after a long moment, "I'm fine." 2 words, voice carefully controlled, slightly too high-pitched. "Zara," I said, just her name, nothing else. Another long silence. Then quietly, so quietly I almost missed it through the door. "I can't get up." I opened the door. The bathroom was warm with steam. She was sitting on the floor of the shower, fully clothed. She hadn't even undressed yet, with the water running over her, the blazer from her interview soaked through, her knees pulled up to her chest, her head down. I stood in the doorway for a second. I genuinely didn't know what to do with my hands. My brain kept throwing up little anxiety flags. You're invading her space, she's embarrassed, she's going to be angry, you should have waited, you. But she looked up at me. And her face. I can't fully describe what her face looked like in that moment. It's one of those things that burns itself into your memory in a way that words can only gesture at. She looked like someone who had been holding their breath underwater for months and had finally broken the surface, not triumphantly, not with relief, but with that desperate, gasping, terrified expression of someone who hadn't realized until that moment that they were drowning. Her mascara had run completely, her blazer was soaked, her hair was plastered to her forehead, and her eyes were doing that thing they do in really private moments of real grief, where all the social armor is gone and you're just seeing the actual person underneath. She looked at me and she said, in the smallest voice I have ever heard come out of someone who usually fills every room she enters, "I don't know what's wrong with me." I crossed the bathroom in about 2 steps. I sat down on the floor of the shower next to her, in my jeans, in my jacket, in my actual clothes, and the water immediately soaked through everything. It was cold, I yelped. She let out this short, startled laugh through her tears. I made a face at her and said something ridiculous like, "Okay, that is freezing, Zara. What is the temperature of this water set to, actual Antarctica?" And she laughed again, a real one this time, broken and wet and kind of hiccupy. And then she cried again, but differently, not that silent, shaking, held-in crying, real crying, with sound and breath and the full weight of everything she'd been carrying. I reached over and turned the shower to warm, then I just sat there, wet jeans and all, next to my best friend on the floor of her shower. I didn't say it's okay. I didn't say you're strong, you've got this. I didn't say everything happens for a reason, or it could be worse, or any of the thousand things we say to people when we're really just trying to make our own discomfort with their pain go away. I said, "You've been holding this for a really long time." And she said, "Yeah." And that was it. That was the whole conversation for a while. Just the warm water and the sound of her finally breathing, and the two of us sitting on a shower floor in our actual clothes like two complete disasters. And in that moment, that ridiculous, soaking wet, mascara-streaked, deeply unglamorous moment, something shifted between us that I still struggle to put into words. Eventually, we turned off the water. We got towels. I gave her my sweatshirt from my bag. I always carry one, a habit from knowing Zara, who keeps her apartment approximately 40 degrees below human comfort levels. She changed into dry clothes. I sat on her bathroom floor with a towel around my shoulders like a very dramatic cape, and she sat on the edge of the tub and we just talked. Really talked, the kind of talking that only happens after something breaks open. She told me about the job, not just the rejection that day, but the 17 other rejections before it. The way she had started to feel like maybe she was fundamentally unemployable. The way she'd been waking up at 4 a.m. with her heart already racing, running through everything she might have done wrong in every application, every interview, every email. She told me about her grandmother, about how she hadn't actually cried properly at the funeral, had held it together so completely, because she'd been the one everyone else leaned on, and how sometimes in the middle of ordinary moments it would just hit her. Washing dishes, or on the subway, or reading a text that she started composing to a contact that no longer existed. She told me she'd been feeling for months like she was made of glass, like one more thing, one more rejection, one more piece of bad news was going to be the thing that finally shattered her. And so she'd been moving very carefully, controlling everything she could, staying busy so she didn't have to stop and feel it. "I've been so scared," she said, "of falling apart, because if I fall apart, then who takes care of everyone else?" And there it was, the thing underneath everything, the core of it. 12 years of being the strong one, 12 years of being everyone's soft place to land, 12 years of learning to love other people so well that she'd completely forgotten to extend any of that same tenderness to herself. She'd convinced herself, the way so many of the most caring people do, that her feelings were a burden, that her pain was an inconvenience, that needing help was a failure, that falling apart meant failing everyone who counted on her to hold it together. I looked at her for a long moment. And then I said something that I'd been thinking for probably years without ever having the words for it. Zara, you are not a support system, you're a person, and I have been letting you be a support system for way too long. She stared at me. I should have knocked on your door months ago, I said. I should have asked harder questions when you said you were fine. I should have pushed past the pivot and the subject change and the you don't have to. That's on me. That's on all of us who love you. We were lazy with you because you made it so easy for us to be lazy with you. Silence. Then I didn't want to be a burden. You're not a burden, I said. You are the most unburdened person I have ever met. You are Zara, you are the person who shows up with soup when people have the flu. You are the person who remembers the anniversary of every bad thing and checks in on people. You are the person who drove 4 hours to sit with me the night of my dad's surgery, even though I said I was fine. Her eyes filled up again. So here is what's going to happen, I said. You are going to let me show up for you, not just tonight, going forward. You're going to let people love you the way you love them. You're going to practice saying I'm not okay out loud to actual people before you end up on the floor of your shower in a soaking wet blazer. Deal. She laughed, it came out half sob, half genuine amusement. The blazer, she said. I can't believe I wore the blazer into the shower. Iconic, I told her, very theatrical of you. And we both laughed fully, warmly, the way we hadn't laughed together in months, until we were leaning against each other and the bathroom tiles were cold against our backs and nothing was resolved, really, not the job or the grief or the 4 a.m. heart pounding, but something else was different. The glass feeling was gone. I've thought about that night 100 times since it happened. I've thought about the 3 minutes I spent frozen outside that door. I've thought about how close I came to walking back to the kitchen and pretending I didn't hear anything. And I've thought about what would have happened if I had, how Zara would have come out of that bathroom 20 minutes later, composed and dry and smiling, and told me she was tired and I should head home, and I would have gone home, and she would have been alone with all of that. There is something we do to strong people that we don't talk about enough. We use their strength. Not maliciously, not consciously, usually, but when someone is consistently the one who shows up, consistently the one who holds it together. Consistently the one who says, I'm fine, don't worry about me, we start to believe them. We start to need them to be fine because their being fine makes it easier for us to be not fine. We outsource our fragility to them, and in doing so we leave them completely alone with their own. The strongest people in our lives are often the loneliest. Not because they don't have people around them, they usually have everyone around them, but because they've learned through years of being needed that their role is to hold space for other people's feelings, not to have feelings of their own, or more precisely, to have feelings privately, quietly, on shower floors at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. And we let them do it because it's comfortable for us. This is not a post about blame. The people in Zara's life, me included, loved her genuinely. We weren't indifferent. We weren't cruel. We just took the path of least resistance over and over again because Zara kept making that path so smooth and so wide and so easy to walk. But love that only flows in one direction isn't really a relationship, it's a dynamic. And dynamics, however comfortable, have a weight limit. What I learned that night is this: checking in on your strong friend is an act of love. Not in a performative way, not the Instagram caption, check on your strong friend's blue heart that we all double tap and immediately forget, but genuinely, specifically, persistently. Asking again when they say fine, noticing the subject change, sitting with the silence long enough to let something real come through. It's uncomfortable. It requires you to push past the social awkwardness of are you sure you're okay? When someone has already told you they are. It requires you to risk them being annoyed with you. It requires you to be present in a way that is genuinely costly, emotionally, energetically, sometimes literally. Sometimes you end up sitting on a shower floor in wet jeans. But that discomfort, that cost, that awkward 3 minutes outside the door. That's what love actually looks like. Things did not magically fix themselves after that night. I want to be honest about that. Zara didn't wake up the next morning transformed. She still had the job search. She still had the grief. She still had the 4 a.m. wake-ups and the rejected applications and the exhaustion of months of running on empty. Real life doesn't do the Hollywood pivot where one honest conversation dissolves all the problems. But something shifted in the architecture of our friendship. She started texting me when she was struggling. Not always, she still defaults to strength, probably always will, but sometimes. A voice memo at midnight, not okay tonight, just wanted to say it out loud. A phone call, can you just talk at me about something normal while I try to fall asleep? A text, saw something on the subway today that made me think of Grandma Layla and I just started crying on the 6 train. I'm okay, but I also needed to tell someone. I started asking harder questions, not just how are you, but how are you actually? And when she said fine, I learned to say okay, but also is there anything underneath that? Not every time, not in a way that felt interrogative or intrusive, but consistently enough that she knew the door was open. We started a thing, unplanned, unspoken, just something that evolved, where once a month or so we'd get together with no agenda, no plans, no getting dressed up or going anywhere fancy, just her apartment or mine, takeout or homemade food, and an honest check-in. We called it our State of the Union, a joke, but also not a joke. And in those sessions, she started talking, really talking, about the grief that didn't go away on a schedule, about the complicated feelings around her parents, about her dreams, not career dreams, but the strange, quiet desires she'd never said out loud because they felt too soft, too vulnerable, too much like admissions that she needed things. She wanted to paint again? She'd painted seriously in high school and had quietly let it go when adult life crowded in. We got her supplies for her birthday. She has a small canvas she works on sometimes in the evenings, and she's not even remotely a professional, and she doesn't care, she just does it. She started therapy. That was maybe the most important thing. Not because I suggested it, I was careful not to push because Zara makes her own decisions and she always has. But she brought it up herself about 2 months after that night and said she thought she wanted to try it. I've been carrying stuff for people my whole life, she said. I think it might be time for someone to carry some of it for me for a while. That was the most Zara sentence I'd ever heard. Practical, self-aware, delivered with a tiny half-smile like she was making fun of herself just slightly. She found a therapist she clicked with, a woman who, apparently, is both extremely insightful and also once made a joke so dry that Zara nearly choked on her water. She's my kind of person, Zara told me. I believed her. Okay, I owe you the awkward part, because I promised awkward and I am a woman of my word. The awkward part isn't really the shower. The shower, as intense and emotional as it was in retrospect the right call. The awkward part came about 45 minutes later. We were in the kitchen, dry clothes, reheated takeout, the blanket from my car finally being used. Things had settled into that specific kind of comfortable that only exists after a genuine cry, that particular warmth of two people who have been emotionally honest with each other and are now somewhat exhausted but also deeply relieved. Her roommate came home. Her roommate, Priya, lovely, funny, perpetually confused by human emotion in the most endearing way, walked through the front door to find her two best friends eating noodles in a blanket fort they had not been there long enough to have actually built, with towels still on the floor, the bathroom door open. The general vibe of something has clearly happened here. Priya looked at us for a long moment. Then she looked at Zara, whose mascara, despite her best efforts, was still faintly panda-streaked. Then she looked at me, who was wearing Zara's sweatshirt over my own jacket because I hadn't bothered to rearrange. Then she looked at the bathroom. Then back at us. Do I want to know, she said. She sat in the shower with me, Zara said, completely deadpan, with all her clothes on. Priya stared at me. She was upset, I said. So you got in the shower. I sat on the floor. With your clothes on. The temperature was very cold initially. Why didn't you just listen? It made sense in the moment. And Zara lost it, completely lost it. Full body laughing, noodles nearly going everywhere, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere very deep in you when tension has been held too long and something cracks it open. Priya stood in the doorway for another 3 seconds, then just said, I'm going to make tea, and went to the kitchen. We laughed for about 4 solid minutes. And that ridiculous, unglamorous, slightly absurd moment is the one I come back to most often. Because that's what real friendship looks like when you strip away all the Instagram versions of it. It's not the aesthetic photo shoot on a rooftop at golden hour. It's not the perfectly captioned birthday post. It's sitting on a cold shower floor in your actual clothes because your person needed you, and then laughing so hard about it afterward that you almost drop your noodles, while your roommate makes tea with the very specific energy of someone who has decided not to ask questions. I told this story for a lot of reasons, but mostly I told it because I think a lot of you watching this right now either are Zara or you love a Zara. Maybe you're the one who holds everything together. Maybe you're the one who everyone calls first when they're struggling, who gives the best advice, who shows up with soup, who never, ever asks for the same in return, not because you don't need it, but because asking feels impossible. Because somewhere along the way you learned that your value was in what you gave, and the idea of needing something felt like failing at your whole identity. If that's you, I need you to hear this. You are allowed to have a hard day, you are allowed to not be okay, you are allowed to text someone at midnight and say, "I'm struggling," without immediately following it with, "But I'm fine, don't worry." You are allowed to sit with your feelings instead of processing everyone else's. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to need. Your strength is a gift, but it is not your only value. You are not a function, you are a person, and people need. Please stop waiting until you're on the floor of your shower. And maybe you're on the other side of this. Maybe you have a Zara in your life, someone who always seems fine, who is always holding it together, who deflects every "how are you" with a smile and a subject change. Maybe you've been comfortable with that, the way we were comfortable with it. Maybe you've been telling yourself they'd say if they needed something. They won't, the strongest people almost never do, not until they break. So go knock on their door. Yes, it might be awkward, yes, they might push back. Yes, you might have to say, "I know you said you're fine, but I'm asking again," 2 or 3 times before something real comes through. Yes, you might end up sitting on a bathroom floor in wet jeans. Do it anyway. Zara got a job. Not the one she interviewed for that November. That door stayed closed, and after a while she stopped knocking on it. But about 4 months later, a different door opened, a research consulting firm, smaller than she'd imagined, doing work that surprised her with how much she cared about it. She called me when she got the offer. I was in the middle of a meeting and I stepped out into the hallway and I held the phone and listened to her voice, which was doing that thing it does when she's trying not to cry from happiness, slightly too controlled, slightly too careful until it isn't. "I got it," she said. "I know," I said, because somehow I did, the same way I knew she needed me to sit on the floor of her shower that night. She has the painting above her desk now, a small canvas, blue and green, something she made on a Sunday afternoon when she was working through a hard week. It's not technically perfect, she'll be the first to tell you that, but it's hers, which is a thing she's been learning to say out loud. Mine, for me, because I wanted to. She still shows up for everyone, that hasn't changed, and I wouldn't want it to. Her capacity for care is not a wound or a flaw, it's one of the most beautiful things about her. The difference is that now she shows up for herself too, not always, not perfectly, but more than before, which is the only standard that matters. We still have our monthly check-ins, still talk about everything. She still sends me voice memos at midnight sometimes, and I've learned to send them back. We have, after 12 years, finally arrived at the version of our friendship that was always possible, the one where both of us get to be human, messy, needing things held. It's better than I knew to want. Friendship, real friendship, isn't always the beautiful stuff. It isn't always the golden hour photos and the birthday messages and the group chat memes. Sometimes it's standing outside a bathroom door for 3 minutes, terrified and knocking anyway. Sometimes it's sitting on a cold shower floor in your good jeans because someone you love needed another person in the room. Sometimes it's saying, "I know you said fine, but are you actually?" one more time past all the polite deflection. Sometimes it's awkward, it's unglamorous. It's sitting in the kitchen afterward, wrapped in a blanket, laughing so hard you nearly drop your noodles while your roommate makes tea with the quiet resignation of someone who has stopped asking questions. But it's real and it matters. And it's the kind of thing that years later you look back on and realize that was the moment. That was the night our friendship became something neither of us has words for, not because it was perfect, because it was honest. If you have someone like that in your life, go tell them, not in a text, call them, show up. And if you are someone like that, someone who has been holding everything together for a very long time, I hope you have someone willing to sit on the floor with you. You deserve that. You've always deserved that. Take care of each other.